Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon,
Good
Prof.
afternoon, sir.
Good, good. Fosti, Jesseline, and Nana. Yeah, you are welcome to today's session.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Fantastic. Today we are going to treat two important concepts which I have boxed them together. They are boxed together. I will do justice to each of them. These are issues that confront us in our day-to-day activities as private persons, as public officers. Even in our various homes, the house, sometimes we are faced with whether to do A or B or C. And the issue is more pronounced or even high for public officials or regulators. My dear friends, today we are discussing ethical dilemma, as well as conflict of interest, which might confront regulators and public officials. Okay, let's imagine this. Say you are for example, you are the director of fisheries. Then we have a large Chinese fishing company, okay, that has violated some regulations, fisheries regulations. And the company is a very good employer, employs over 800 Ghanaian workers. Then you'll be torn between regulation and then people's livelihood. Now, it is also, let's say, just 4 weeks before a general election, before general elections. And the sector minister for fisheries, well, part of the campaign team of their political party. And if you want to crack the whip on this fishing company that has violated the laws, many people, over 800, will be affected, not just the 800, but their dependents, which means they will run over more than 1,500 or 2,000 people. And the minister calls you as the director of fisheries. The minister calls you in the evening and says, you know what, Nana, suspend enforcement until after the elections. Now, if you are the director of fisheries, what are you going to do? You are torn between two situations, whether to do A or to do B. This is a typical situation we call ethical dilemma. You are in a dilemma whether to go on with the enforcement of regulation, which might require some sanction, or to succumb to the political pressure, which usually comes all the time. But as professional and neutral civil servants, what are you going to do? And these situations or scenarios confront us all the time in our various endeavors That makes ethical dilemma a very crucial topic, my dear friends, for us to discuss and share our thoughts on them today. Are you going to enforce the law? Are you going to obey the political instruction? Are you going to negotiate? Will you delay action? Well, this is not something which can easily be answered because each of them would have an implication. And that is an ethical dilemma. This is an ethical dilemma which people go through all the time. That is ethical dilemma. My dear friends, so let's go to our presentation outline. This is just a teaser, okay? But by the end of this session today, my dear friends, you should be able to explain what you mean by ethical dilemma in public administration. You should be able to distinguish between ethical dilemma from ethical misconduct. Ethical dilemma from ethical misconduct. And then we will be done with the ethical dilemma. From there, we go to our next, which is conflict of interest. You should be able to explain conflict of interest. And then, yeah, of course, conflict of interest comes in three main forms. We should be able to identify the different forms of conflict of interest. And then some ethical challenges in fisheries governance and some strategies for preventing these. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Ethical dilemma. Once we talk of ethical dilemma, it is a complex situation. It is a complex situation that confronts individuals, and it involves apparent choices between moral imperatives. We are confronted with an issue. It involves apparent choices between moral imperatives in which one would result in transgressing the other. So the scenario I gave, if you have to succumb to the pressure from the politician or the minister, you will transgress regulation, which might also have some serious implication on the environment, the economy, and maybe society. But if you also want to go by enforcing the law, okay, if you also want to enforce the law, you might also go into the wrong books. You'll be at the wrong side of the sector minister, which might have some serious consequences, which maybe you might not want to risk. So in such a situation, that is ethical dilemma. You are faced with a complex situation which involves apparent choices, okay? Apparent choices. Of course, it is a mental conflict. You will sit down, or still you will be sitting down Do I do A or B? Nana, so it gives you some kind of mental conflict. What do I do? Do I go by option A or option B? And you see that, let me take Yeboah-Assiamah Francis. You see that your cortisol level will be very, very high, okay? Because you'll be getting sleepless nights. Mental conflict between two moral imperatives, in which to obey one would result in transgressing another. What are you going to do? Many business entities, individuals, and executives find themselves in ethical dilemma situation almost all the time. All times we are faced with this. To do A or to do B. They are mutually exclusive. If you do A, you are transgressing the other. When faced with such, public officials or regulators often walk on a tight rope, a very tight rope you are walking on, because if you don't take care, you fall. You fall. It's a tight rope you are walking on, and you need to manage it carefully and tactfully. It's complex and complicated. You find yourself between a hard place and a rock. Okay. This is a typical example here. Well, of course, if you are a doctor, medical doctor, this is a patient, okay? And the patient is suffering from an ailment. She has cancer, but her family doesn't want her told. And so they have instructed the doctor maybe not to disclose to this patient because her cortisol level might rise up, which might even affect the medication given her. And so that's the instruction given the MD. Then the patient asks, do I have cancer? You know, patient has right to know the condition. Well, but this is a minor, okay? This is a minor, so that might not hold. The guardian does not want the minor to know cancer status. Now, if the nurse is in an ethical dilemma, whether to tell the truth or to withhold the status. Nana, if you were the nurse, what are you going to do? The patient has asked you, do I have cancer? What will you do?
Yeah, it's really a dilemma.
Yes, it's a dilemma. You find yourself
really
between a hard place and a rock.
Yeah, for this particular one.
Yeah,
for this particular one, I will go for the position of the institution. So if nurses work under the directives and guidance of doctors, then I will go by what the doctor has said.
Okay, very well. Okay, Jess.
Yes, sir, you were saying it wasn't the doctor that was asking that had instructed the nurse, but the relative of the minor, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So in this situation, because the person is a minor, that one you could hold on. But if the person was supposed to be an adult, I would say the nurse or the doctor could break the news to the adult.
Okay.
Yeah, but Prof,
Nana.
if it is as Jocelyn is saying that it is not, I had initially thought the family has discussed that with the doctor, and so the doctor telling the nurse not to.
Yes.
But if it is
Uh-huh.
the family, if it is the family and the nurse, then the nurse will have to do as agreed with the family, so that if the family tells the nurse not to disclose, if the nurse finds it improper, then the nurse has to raise it with the family and agree with the family on whether to disclose or not. So here I want to presume that the nurse agreed with the family not to disclose. And for that matter, the nurse has to abide by what?
Yes. Yeah. So
The
the family engaged with the doctor. Okay. So the doctor is aware. For the doctor, he wouldn't. But the nurse is going to attend to the patient. And that's why the doctor is informing the nurse of what has been agreed upon, okay, with the family members. Well,
Exactly.
she has cancer, but the family doesn't want her told. So as you are going there, just be careful. And true to that, well, the patient, asked the nurse, do I have cancer? Then this gives apparent mental conflicts, okay, to the nurse, because then there are two moral imperatives, whether to disclose to her or to go by what she has been told professionally, okay? All right, so that is ethical dilemma, which we are faced all times.
Oh, please, I have a question.
Yes.
Yes. So please, per the definition, you said moral imperative. So when moral is part of the definition, it means something that is right, right?
Yes.
So thinking of the minister or the director's example or scenario, what the minister is suggesting, to me, it's not morally right or so I would, if I were the director, I would have said I'll go for what is morally right. Uh-huh. So
And then
I'm thinking about the definition of ethical dilemma. Uh-huh. So
Yes.
what if it's more morally right? That means I have to go for it, right?
Okay. Fossey, you wanted to make a point?
yes, please.
Okay.
I was about to say, oh yes, although it's morally right, but this is a pressure coming from above. And then if you follow the moral to your moral or your instincts, your job is going to be at stake.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes you be in dilemma, as you already mentioned. It will put you in a very critical condition, whether to follow your morals or to go by the ethics or the minister's, what do we call it, what he is asking for.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Nana?
Yes, Prof.
Yes.
Prof, the narrative confuses me about ethical dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
I am understanding ethical dilemma to be a case of two ethical, but opposing sides.
Mm-hmm.
That you are confronted with a situation where whichever way you take will have ethical concerns.
Yes.
That is the understanding I got from ethical dilemma. And so immediately you introduced, my mind took me back to the security gates at University of Ghana, where the
Yes.
security guard has to decide whether to comply with the rules or to allow a sick,
Very good. Yes.
to
To
be to
access the
pass through
gates.
to access the gate. Now the fisheries director and the Chinese infraction, I find that one as a case of one being ethical and one simply being unlawful, and not
Okay.
an ethical issue.
Okay.
So we need to be clear on this. Other than that, then you may be confronted in addressing an illegality completely. As
Yes.
against, then we may tend to be comparing the two.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay.
please, we may have to relook at it. But then to also support the point that Posti made. Yes, Justin's case is right. Unfortunately, we live in a society and a world which is simply not fair. And so when you are in a position where you work under an authority, then sometimes these matters you will have to take a very critical look at it. Other than that, you end up messing up rather the whole thing, turning the whole thing upside down. And a classical case we have is the case of Ghana football, where somebody identifies rot, gather evidence, and then bring it out. The GFA is dissolved, normalization committee is formed, and our football has lost its glory. So people now question, could we have maintained the old system and maintain our glory? Or there was a better way we could have? Yeah, so Jesselyn's point of, oh, yes, the minister was wrong, so I will not go by it. It comes with serious implications, and it can affect entire institution. And so the director of fisheries will simply not throw it away because the minister is wrong, but we'll have to look at a more mature.
All right. Thank you very much. So you are all right, and even the GFA, scenario you gave, the reporter or the investigator, even after discovering everything, will be in an ethical dilemma whether to disclose or not to disclose. Okay, because each of the two courses of action, whether to disclose the rot or to withhold and maybe to make management work on it, it's also the course of action. Each one has implication. Each one can be justified. Okay, each one can be justified. And so any point in time when we are confronted, okay, with two competing courses of action, each of them, so the director can simply say that, well, if he might want to go by the minister's directive, okay, that is a course of action. After all, at the end of the day, the sector minister, okay, has kind of a political control. And so if you are to go by their directive, well, you are following out orders. You are following out order, which you can justify. You might also say that, well, no, I'm a professional, and then I'm going by the professional line, which you can also justify. Each of them might have their implication, as Fosti mentioned. Each of them has an implication, and it is a moral imperative, just because
Yes.
if you are to defy, the directive of the minister, it could be misconstrued, or it could be taken as what? Insubordination. You understand? And then
Okay.
you will face for the consequence. We have also learned that ethical or egoism argues that people should also advance their long-term, best interests. And that is why it is a moral imperative. Then it gives you an apparent mental conflict. What do I do? Do I follow the order, or do I do the right thing? And so at all times, then we are confronted with such a situation, because it is not easy simply saying that, well, you ignore and then you do this other one, which you know how polarized the political environment might seem. People can frame things and then use it to get you off the hook or off the way. And that is what makes it ethical dilemma. The thing he's asking you to do is not a moral one, but it has an implication. It has an implication, and that is why you are confronted with such a difficult situation at the moment, whether to comply and then be in the good books, or to do what you think is right and then face the consequence. By the way, in ethics, we have been told that we don't have to follow orders blindly, okay? Because following orders cannot exonerate you. Following orders blindly can never exonerate an individual. For example, if you're an accountant, and then you say, in order not to face the wrath of your boss, anything he tells you to pay, then you are paying, even if it is contrary to law or the financial management or regulation. You are just following the order. Now, let's say there's a change of government, and then they haul you before the court. Simply saying you were following orders will not exonerate you. Nana, can it? It will not. Each of you might be facing their own prosecution. Okay?
Yes,
It cannot. In the Nuremberg trials, okay, soldiers that were engaged in killing civilians, they were never exonerated simply by saying that we were following command of our superiors. That was why we were killing. No, it was one of the clauses in the Nuremberg trials that, hey, following orders cannot be a defense. So, but you also are aware that if you fail to follow, then it has some implications. And that is what makes it ethical dilemma. How to manage our bosses in such situations. Okay, so my dear friends, it is not easy dealing with ethical dilemma situations. But the fact that we are faced with ethical dilemma does not necessarily mean it is ethical misconduct. The dilemma is when you are faced with a difficult choice, but it becomes ethical misconduct when one is engaged in wrong conduct. With ethical dilemma, the public officer or the individual is faced with competing ethical values, whether to follow your boss, whether to follow orders, whether to follow orders, or to do what you think is right. with ethical misconduct, there is what clear violation. You violated what is the right thing to be done. In ethical dilemma, there is no perfect answer. You just have to manage the situation with what? With tact and diligence. It requires reasoned judgment. Nana? Yes, Nana? You've raised your hand.
Yes, Prof.
Yes.
Prof, your point on ethical dilemma being a mere difficulty in choosing. If you are to go by the rules of engagement, then there wouldn't be much difficulty in choosing. From experience, difficulty in choosing arises in our attempt to go around the rules of engagement. And that slips into misconduct.
Yes.
So if we say ethical dilemma is about making a difficult choice, and it is not wrong conduct,
Yes.
Could you please make it clearer for me?
So the ethical dilemma is when you are faced with a situation. Okay. For example, if you are an examiner, okay, and the students, they have failed. So that one, well, you have no issue. But say let's say your boss calls you that this person must pass. And must pass by all means. You are aware that we are working on a promotion or something, okay, for you. And then you see at that point in time, then you are faced with a situation. Whether to go by what is right, they have fulfilled, or someone is maybe threatening you, okay, with something. So then you are faced with a difficult choice. There is an apparent mental conflict, moral imperative. Do you follow your promotion thing, which maybe someone has threatened you, or you go by what you think is right? This is a difficult choice you are faced with. Okay. Now it becomes ethical misconduct if you are engaged in a wrong conduct. For example, then you are passing someone who has failed. That is a wrong conduct. Okay. At that point, then that becomes a wrong conduct. But the moment you were faced with the two scenarios, which of course everyone knows what is right, what is the right thing to do. Okay. The right thing to do is to do it as it is. Take the marks obtained by the candidates, just record the mark. That's the right thing to do. But because you are faced with two scenarios, then there's difficulty in making a choice, whether to go by A or to go by B. That is where it requires mature judgments, applying all the theories of ethics. Okay, all the theories of ethics. This you can apply Immanuel Kant's argument, or the golden rule, and all the theories, whether consequential, non-consequential. You have to think through before you can make a reason or argument or choice, which you can justify. You can justify even when you are asked. Okay. So ethical dilemma always places people in a difficult situation, making difficult choices, because the choice one makes has implication on whether they are short-term or they are long-term, even socioeconomic or whatever endeavors. And so it's a difficult choice. But if one does not make a sound judgment and does not make a very good judgment, then it might result in ethical misconduct, because then they make the wrong choice, ethical misconduct, which should be a clear violation of maybe their professional standards, okay, and then might require some sanction, okay. So most ethical misconduct begin from ethical dilemma. But if we don't think through, okay, and make the right judgment, then it slips into ethical misconduct, which might require some sanction, or which violates some clear regulations, okay, that guide our activity or our profession. That might require some sanction. But simply faced with ethical dilemma is in itself not wrong. It only places you under difficult choice situation, whether to do A or B, okay? But at all times, we know the right thing to do. But because of the apparent mental conflicts, and then faced with some, egoistic tendencies by people, we know the right thing to do, not to engage in. Now, maybe, Nana, you said it is not usually difficult situation, but it is difficult. Listen to this scenario. Let's watch this keenly. And then I'll come back to Nana, whether it is not a difficult situation.
Most of the service provided were people that I knew personally, and there were people that had supported us, and I know they support both sides. And so you have a situation where you have gone to take money from the person to run your campaign, and then you come back and say you are now investigating the person, canceling his contracts, and it was very, very, very difficult. So I started asking myself questions. I mean, what is it that we can do that, because the average businessman will rather put his 5 million or 10 million back into his business to expand. But we go to them and put pressure on them. We need money, we need money. And indeed, we do need money. And then afterwards, when we take the money from them, they are business people, they are not charities. So they have to recoup their money. And when they now do things and then we now turn back and say we are investigating them, then what are we doing? Are we deceiving ourselves? So for me, you've heard about Bost. An MP was very honest and frank. He said the Bost man cannot be sacked because he contributed heavily to the campaign. These are realities. We all know of the various case studies. This is not a forum for me to be giving examples, but I just gave 2 examples covering the tenets of both parties for us to have an idea of the kind of practical challenges that we face. And so anytime you see any hundios, controversial, seemingly questionable contract, and I'm saying seemingly, look closely, and you are most likely to see a major political party financier behind it. So how can we ensure that we get value for money from projects, and at the same time also ensure that our political parties have money to function effectively, because we do need money?
Nana, is it not does it not pose difficult situation, making difficult choice? Ethical dilemma. You see,
Prof,
have
I
a
don't
practical.
think so.
Sorry.
Prof, I don't think so.
Okay, why?
Okay. So I want to look at it from 2 sides.
Yes.
The first part being the going for money to fund political campaign.
Yes.
That is against the law. But we do. So you cannot do the wrong thing and come and argue that you find yourself in a difficult situation to decide, because you knew you were doing the wrong thing. So that is one side of it. The next side of it is that Yes, somebody provided you with funding for you to come to power. You have so many ways to pay the person back. Must you allow illegality as a payback, or you can still pay back within legal means? So if there are legal means to pay back, why will you embroider yourself in illegalities as a justification that you find yourself in a difficult situation because this person funded me, and so I have to allow an illegality as a payback? That is why I don't find it. If we want to do the right thing, we can do the right thing.
I think, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. But that you've gone for the person's money, you come and then you say you are investigating the person. Investigate for what? That is the question he posed. That's the question he posed. You are going to
Okay,
investigate
so
the very person you went for their money.
Doc Chris,
So is it the person, or like maybe the government is rather, will not be an individual. It's not me that I went for the money that I'm investigating, but the government in which I find myself is
Yes,
investigating.
yes.
And also, usually, say these people, like the people who give the money, are usually quote unquote party members, because I cannot be in maybe one party and give you money. So that means if I'm in your party and have given you money, that means I'm partially part of the government, because it's my party that is there. So
These
Nana
are
saying,
they are business
mhm,
people who might not even be
mhm.
affiliated, but because of
Oh,
their
okay.
businesses, they fund NPP, they fund NDC, okay? Because they don't want a situation where NDC will come and then will be harassing them, or NPP will come and will be harassing
Mm.
them. So then
Yeah.
they share it. Okay, you people take, you people also take. So at all
Oh,
times
okay.
they are in business, right?
Mm.
Irrespective of which
Mhm.
political party comes. They are there because then those were his words, okay, and that's very
Mm.
practical, okay,
Mm.
because there's a tendency for governments to even target business people who fund opposition political parties. So today,
Mm.
businesses are very wise. They support both,
Okay.
right? And then
Mhm.
it gives regulators, or if you like, public officers, it places them in a very complicated or complex situation,
Complex.
right? So that is the reality of what we face. But I also agree with Nana that
Mhm.
there are legal ways to to ensure the person maybe gets their profits. Um, there are legal ways for them to get their profits. Um, so maybe they are to go by that. Okay, yeah. Then you will
Mm.
not face
But
Please,
any.
say,
Nana said
please,
something.
Yeah,
Nana
yes.
said something that it was illegal for someone to go for money. Please, is it really true that it's illegal?
That
Is
is
it in the
that's
law?
the challenge.
Mhm.
There's political parties need money, and where would the money come from? Okay, if
Mm.
um, these are businesses locally, they are also citizens, right? It is not illegal, okay, to
yeah,
get money, but
Prof,
then there should be some disclosures. The Political
exactly.
Party Act,
Mm.
That is the point.
that's
You
the
are
thing.
supposed to disclose
Yeah,
all funding.
all funding,
And the opaqueness, it is the opaqueness that allows
which
businesses
the
like this
EC
to do
has not been doing. You see, in many
exactly
countries,
Mm.
there are caps. You cannot even
as
take
to the
money
amount,
from,
as to the
I mean,
amount you
money
can even
above
take.
certain thresholds. Okay,
You
there is a
cannot.
ceiling.
Mm.
There are
Yeah.
ceilings with regards to how much you can get from an individual or an entity. Um,
Exactly.
Mm.
yeah. So that's the situation. But because, both political parties, they are aware, and the EC is also aware that the kind of monies required is more and the state is not, funding. And this is an area which scholars have argued most about. And whether the state should help political parties with regards to funding. And the recent Supreme Court ruling that henceforth even the delegate system is illegal or unconstitutional, and that they should open up the space for every registered member to vote, which even puts more economic hardship, will put more economic hardship. It has economic implication for political parties. And some people were asking, so who will fund this? And these are things that generate, national conversation. It is because of that, which is why the Electoral Commission has not been too keen, with regards to enforcing these, laws accurately, because of the realities and then the practicalities of funding political parties. And that if they are to be too strict on that, it's going to be difficult for political parties. Like Elvis said, we chase the companies that we need money. And indeed, we need the money. So that's the thing. So yes, of course. All right.
But Prof, I think what makes it difficult for them to investigate is when they needed them. I did investigate going for the money. You see, but after getting the money and getting power,
yes,
the business people, the businessmen, if really they know the person is not doing any illegality, they should have investigated what the person is really doing before going for the money. But they won't, because they needed the money badly. They will rather go for the money, and later when they get power, then they will come and say, we want to investigate.
So the thing is that they are even aware already before they will even go for the money. You get it?
For money.
So let's say you are in opposition, you know that the deal is even bad, and you have even been talking about it, but you know that low key you've gone for money from them to run your campaign. So when you come, even though it was part of your campaign that when you come you'll be doing this, but you know that you went for money from them for campaign, then it becomes difficult. That's the ethical dilemma. Let's say you are the sector minister, you know the routes, but then let's say the party executives, who maybe went for the money to run the campaign, then they are telling, hey, minister, hold on with this. You need to tread cautiously with this, and then you are in a dilemma. Because to be a minister, you need a party approval. You understand that? And so then you are there, whether to investigate or even to scrutinize, those policies or those contracts, or to abide by what the political party executives are telling you, knowing very well that they are, they sit with the president or they are in cabinet. So if you want to demonstrate insubordination, and that's the practical challenge with ethical dilemma, Nana. You cannot sleep because you've seen the rots there, but then some people are telling you, hey, this one there, like he mentioned, the boss, this one cannot be sacked. But meanwhile, maybe you've seen something. Do you go, if you are the sector minister, do you go ahead and then be the executioner? These are practical, ethical dilemma challenges, which of course in our part of the world is difficult for people to resign. Like you do the right thing and say, well, I've resigned if you put in. But when you are faced with ethical dilemma, whether you are to go by the school code of conduct or maybe your friends are asking you to do something, you see, ethical dilemma is not ethical misconduct, but we need to do the right thing. I was there the other time, and then an old, yes, an old Okatachi. This guy, well, they were my seniors,
Wow.
and so yes, I was there, and then this our senior busy called me. Oh, doc, um, one of our friends, they have finished school long ago. Okay, so then they needed reference. I said, oh, reference, I said it's easier. I mean, once you came to UG, it's easier. So I was flowing with them. He introduced someone to me. He's also a Katachi. So then the person came, and then in our interaction, I said, oh, it's easier. I mean, reference letter there. Then later, not knowing that it was someone who is abroad. So the second person was fronting for someone who is abroad. This one is abroad, and then he needs a reference. I asked, did the person attend UG? He said, "Oh, on no crowd, the school, some crowd, he's just there. He needs employment, and they want someone to write that the guy has been to school to this." You see, at that point in time, whether to follow friendship or old boyism, or to go by what code of conduct. But that one, it was easier for me because, well, as Nana will say, Nana. So that one I sat with you. It was easier because there was no way I was going to compromise, and write that this person attended UG. Use what letterhead. There was no way. So it was easier for me at that time. It was very easy because this one is even a very distant, person. Okay. But it becomes even more difficult when it is someone very closer. Nana, I'm sure today your wife is there with you, isn't it? Nana, it's wifey there. Huh? If it is wifey who introduced someone, maybe I'm sure she will not. But let's say she does, then it becomes very difficult for you at that time. Okay, so I just shot it. Well, so the guy was calling me. I was not picking. He realized that no, the professor is not interested in that kind of a thing. Okay, so I did not. Just last 2 weeks, he came back that well. Now he wants a reference. He wants to travel abroad. He did political science. I gave him a template, okay, for him to fill in his details and bring it to me. He has brought it. Now my next thing I'll do is to tell him to bring me his transcript, okay, to indeed verify if So, but these are things that practical people go through. If it is a very distant relationship, it's easier to make a choice. Or if it is someone that if you feel today you don't face any consequences, easier. But flip the coin and then bring someone very influential or that someone that can affect your job. Let's say you are in, then you are in an apparent what? You are having an apparent mental conflict. When you sleep, you will not sleep. Assuming your godfather or your father, your spiritual father calls you something on that day, But these are things public officers go through.
Yeah, so Prof.
Nana?
So Prof, it confirms the point that if you want to do the right thing, sometimes it is very easy to decide. We find ourselves in those difficult positions because we see that let me then you box yourself in a position. If it was even your spiritual father, and you want to do the right thing, there wouldn't be so much difficulty in deciding.
Of course.
It is obvious.
Yeah.
But because you now want to meet your spiritual father halfway, then you now have to do permutations.
When you continue to do the right thing, they will even value you for that. They give you some kind of, they place some value on you and
some respect.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's ethical dilemma. Now, In our field, in marine and the fisheries sector, ethical dilemma is even more crucial, because fisheries or the sector involves scarce resources, and we have competing users, and there are huge political interests. This is an area where there is huge political interest all the time, whether to give premise fuel to fisher folk, whether to close the sea or not to close the sea, and all these have implications. It also has implication on environmental sustainability, livelihood issues, international agreements, food security, and these are the imperatives. At all time, any decision that we might want to take, it has some other imperatives. If you go by strict regulation, you might step on the foot of maybe someone who has political interest, let's say a minister or an MP. And then you are found between a hard rock and then between a rock and a hard place. Because if you want to do the right thing, then maybe your job or your interest is at stake. And ethical egoism will not agree to some of these, And that is why it makes it difficult for you. At a point in time, once you decide to do that right thing, then you know that you are doing it openly, lovingly, patriotically, but you are also ready to face the consequence, That is how, ethics, we are asked to display or put on our ethical cap. You do it openly. Well, Mr. Minister, I've heard you, but the right thing must be done. You are doing it openly, lovingly, and you are ready to face any consequence, once your conscience tells you that that's the right thing you will done. Political interest, environmental, these are the things that makes the space that we find ourselves very difficult. An action might have several imperatives. There are economic interests versus conservation. So let's say that some people are engaging in an action. You want to crack their whip in order to safeguard conservation or environmental sanctity. And then you are thinking about the people's livelihood. They have the economic interest. So, periodically, which month do we close the season? Which month? The fishing season.
Usually July, August for the.
Yes, July, August. They say,
right.
well, the fishes, they want to reproduce and what have you. So, well, in order to enhance conservation, we close the season. Those days, you saw the minister. I remember clearly how Akumsin will go there with a big key, and then he flips it towards the right, and then it means is well, it is a closed season, and then later they go and do that ceremony again. Now, anytime they are going to close the sea, the closed season, then people are also talking about the livelihood or the economic interest of people, whether to close or not to close. Sometimes there are somewhat negotiations, bargains, and to the extent that the conservation issues, the economic interest might override conservation issues, which might have an implication. Some countries have done that, and then it didn't end well with them. We will look at some of these. Sometimes also government revenue consideration versus environmental sustainability, which might be a source of ethical dilemma. employment issues versus law enforcement. Like the one we mentioned, if you are too hard on the vessel, they are employing over 800 people, and so do you throw the baby with the bathwater, or what do you do? This is a source of a dilemma. Political pressure versus professional independence. This is usually sometimes what people face, like what the director of fisheries, the scenario I gave, whether to go by the professional way of doing the thing or to succumb to the sector minister. Traditional fishing rights versus what modern regulation. These are some of the things that will cause ethical dilemma among regulators and then the local people. Each of these, at all point in time, one is faced with whether to go by A or to B, making it what difficult to make choices in one way or the other at all times. Okay, a district fisheries officer discovers illegal fishing by influential local politicians. If prosecuted, the law is upheld. This is what regulation. If ignored, the officer keeps his job. What should the officer do? So yes, you are faced with this. You know, power lies in the hands of the political class. Then you discover that an influential local politician is engaged in one or two of these. Let me use a typical example. If in the previous era, if let's say you were the forestry commission officer or you were the minerals commission officer, and then you've heard that this is just I'm not saying that is the merit or what, but then you heard that Akonta Mines has, maybe illegally entered a forest, okay? And you know the face behind what Akonta Mine, very powerful person, has access to the presidency. You want to what? You want to engage in applying the law, and then you receive some calls from high-ranking what state officers or officials. Now you want to prosecute. If you prosecute, the law is protected, but then your job is on the line. If you ignore, you keep your job. What should you do at that point in time? These are things that officials do face. This is a typical ethical dilemma situation. What do we do at this point in time? What should the officer do? What should the officer do? Yes, they've given you the threats. You have it. What should happen? Yes, my dear friends. Is it easier?
I will keep my. It's not easy. I'll keep my job.
You keep your job. Nana?
Yes.
Nana, what will you do? And you see, I think last 3 years or 4 years, we went to some areas in the Western region to gather data. We were doing a study on illegal mining, okay? Illegal mining. And I was there with one professor in the business school, Professor Gafaru Abdullahi. We were there to physically do the interviews. So we went and we had engagement with I think the district, some police officers there. We posed the question, the officer was laughing, okay? He was laughing. You know why he was laughing? Because it was like, people, you don't know what you are even asking. Yes, they see the people mining all the time. They see them. But the hands behind those people, it becomes difficult for officers to even to deal with the issue. It is easier to go and just arrest and prosecute people, but the hands behind making it difficult. If prosecuted, the law is protected, but the officer faces some kind of threats to their job security, and that makes it difficult for them. That is a typical ethical dilemma. What should the officer do? So, my dear friends, and this is why we went through the theories of ethics. And, well, when faced with ethical dilemma, people are required to reason through. It is not easy, but it requires making sound judgments. It's a difficult choice, Nana. Some of them are not very difficult, but some are so difficult, which requires judgments, because it comes with competing ethical values, but one needs to handle it with tact at all times. Public administrators serve a lot of constituencies who put various demands on these officials to get favor, which in most cases are countervailing. Okay, to do one might mean transgressing the other. To succumb to the political pressures might mean that regulation might suffer. Okay, regulation must suffer. At best, then you mitigate the kind of breaches they are causing. Okay, so instead of cracking the whip, well, you might want to mitigate the challenges that the situation is bringing, so that at least you are saving the public, you are saving society, and you are also keeping your job. Okay, so that you find yourself in a balance. How do we right the wrong, mitigate the challenge? Because you are serving different constituencies. Each of them, what they are asking you to do has countervailing impacts. They are mutually exclusive. And so how do you find the middle ground? Because if you don't act well, and then they ask you, or let me say they sack you, they'll bring someone, and the person will be there, the things will be worse than if you were there. At least you could mitigate, the ills and whatever, and you ensure a fair balance, which is better than maybe they sacking you, bringing someone, maybe bringing a decoy, and then engage in the thing. By the time you realize, they've cut all the trees and what have you, and they are mining. Okay, and so ethical dilemma puts officers in a very tight situation, difficult situation. Now, these countervailing demands come from the family, church, political party, old friends, among others, which usually affect the decision-making of public officials, often ushering them into a situation of ethical dilemma. Ethical dilemma is a complex situation that often involves an apparent mental conflict between two moral imperatives. Okay, well, I've talked about this. In one way or the other, officials are in most cases caught in a tight corner in an attempt to make decisions at their workplace. Okay, right. So that is ethical dilemma, my dear friends. We've established that It places officers in a very complex situation. And once faced with that, it requires deep thought, making some mental judgments, going through some ethical situations. Sometimes it even calls for sitting down with the superiors, okay? Rather than simply, calling their bluff, it requires for sitting down. Because some issues requires political engagement, political settlement, putting various scenarios on the board to see the right thing to be done. Because you're also thinking about the long-term interest. Because in the interim, it's easier to say I'm resigning or for them to sack you. But the very thing you want to protect, if they sack you, then they bring someone who will not even care about mitigating anything in the situation. Then what have you achieved, my dear friends? So it requires a lot of deep thought so that you maintain a fair balance and ensure the right thing is done. Okay, are we together? Let's look at conflict of interest. Any question, comment? But let's go to conflict of interest, my dear friends. I like this quotation, this one from the gods are not to blame. Did you also read the gods are not to blame? Or they are
Yes,
usually?
sir.
Yes, good.
Yes.
The gods are not to blame. So when, is it Odewale or who?
Yes, Odewale.
Yes, Odewale.
Odewale and Aderosu.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I remember this clearly. Two rams cannot drink from the same bucket at the same time. They will lock horns. Okay. So that was when, the man had gone to Rome and has come back when Adetusa has been killed. So well, he came back and then he married the queen mother. The queen mother had a son. What's the name? Is it Aderopo, right? Yes. So he was having challenge with the new with the mother's husband. Let me put it that way. Eventually they'll be brothers, but then at that point in time, that was his stepfather. So the new king will say, well, two rams cannot drink from the same bucket at the same time, they will lock horns. It is also said that if you use your two eyes to look into the bottle, it is the nose that usually sees inside. Now, these two sayings suggest that as public officers, sometimes we are faced with some situations where our public office may interfere with our private interest. We might have some private interest in a situation that our public office is engaged in. When faced with that, we call it conflict of interest. Public administrators should not foil themselves in two contrasting positions where they have stakes in which one would necessarily affect their judgments or decisions and actions as public servants. You are the public officer, but the kind of action or decision that you are about to take, you have interest. Maybe you are a shareholder in the company, and the company is coming to seek contracts from the very office that you occupy. The person coming for the job, you know the person, but you are part of the panel to do the interview. You have an interest in that situation, but you're also the public officer who is a member of the panel. So then that is a conflict of interest situation. Conflict of interest is found in all situations among different players, as regulators, as business people, judges, public administrators, lecturers, referees. We all come face to face with conflict of interest at all times. Now, according to Williams, conflict of interest is a situation in which an employee has a private financial interest sufficient to influence or appear to influence the exercise of his or her public duties and responsibilities. The OECD, this is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Anytime I am teaching an OECD comes up, the best way I describe OECD is rich countries or club. In Ghana, we have a club, and that club is for only rich people. Bossy, are you aware of that club? Only rich people are members. What's the club?
East Legon Executive.
The East Legon Executive. That is a rich man's club. Now, once you hear OECD, it's also made up of what? Rich countries. Okay. OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's an organization made up of these are rich countries. OECD. Sometimes we call them OECD countries. Now, they define conflict of interest as a situation involving a conflict between the public duty and private interest of a public official, in which the public official has private interest, which could improperly influence the performance of their official duties and responsibilities. So, you see, conflict of interest might place public officers in an ethical dilemma situation. So they move hand in hand. Conflict of interest might, so let's say you are the director of fisheries, your nephew, or your nephew seeks job, or your nephew is engaged in a private entity or private company within the fisheries value chain. And so then there's a conflict between the public duty and your private interest. And that might place you in an ethical dilemma situation. It might, or it could improperly influence the performance of your official duty. Not that it will, but then it could. So note it very well. Sometimes there is no direct linkage that it even would influence, but there's an appearance. What would third parties think about this? What would third party think about this? So conflict of interest is not usually even direct. We have indirect or potential. That is why in law, we usually say justice must not just be done, but must be seen to be done. So if the optics are not good, it means that we need to be careful. What would third parties think about this? That you were the chair of the panel that same interviewed your wife for the job. Well, you can say that you didn't influence the process, but what would third parties think about it? What would disinterested people think about the situation? That you gave the contract to a company that you are a shareholder, being the biggest shareholder. Well, you can say that you didn't influence, but what would third parties think about it? So we say that the public official has private interest, which could Even if it did not, was there a potential which could improperly influence the performance of the official duties and responsibilities? So either way, you find yourself in a situation, whether you influence or you did not influence, the question we will ask is that, could it have had any implication? If the answer is yes, did you disclose it? Then you will see that you are in trouble. Yes. Is it Nana?
No, please.
Okay, someone was calling me. Or I should proceed. Okay. Conflict of interest exists when the public employee's public responsibilities clash. Not just clash, or what appear to clash. So note it very well. So we are not always even talking about direct, but then could it have had any impact? Was there any appearance of it? So when there exists any situation which could clash or appear to clash with his or her private economic affair, this conflict or convergence is invariably reduced to two specific kind of interest. The interest you have in the public office and also your private interest, let me put it that way. But I have a teaching and learning resource on conflict of interest. Maybe in a few minutes you will go through, and then we will look at the types of conflict of interest. Okay.
A conflict of interest is any situation where your private interests interfere or appear to interfere with company interests. Conflicts of interest most often occur when you or a family member may benefit personally as a result of your position within the company. Here are some examples of conflicts of interest. You or a close family member are working for a competitor or supplier, or potential ones, regardless of the nature of the employment. Hiring or supervising family members or closely related individuals. Serving as a board member for an outside commercial company or organization. Owning or having a substantial interest in a competitor, supplier, or contractor. Having a personal interest, financial interest, or potential gain in any company transaction. Placing company business with a firm owned or controlled by a company employee or his or her family. Or accepting gifts, discounts, favors, or services from a customer or potential customer, competitor, or supplier, unless equally available to all employees.
Determining whether a conflict of interest exists is not always easy to do. Employees with a conflict of interest question should seek advice from management before engaging in any activity, transaction, or relationship that might give rise to a conflict of interest. Employees must seek review from their managers or the HR department. Company policy requires that you disclose any time you become aware of a potential conflict of interest. Even if you think there's no conflict of interest, if it has the potential to become one or has the appearance of a conflict of interest, you are required to report it. If you choose not to disclose a potential conflict of interest that later turns out to be okay, you are still in violation of our code for keeping it quiet. The best way to protect yourself against accusations of potential conflicts of interest is to disclose areas of concern yourself before someone else brings it up.
All right. So that is conflict of interest. If you have a stake or if you have interest in an issue, you need to disclose your stakes so that even if you have to be recused from the panel, you do so, then you are fine. That is why when judges are to sit on certain cases, there are some you say, this one I cannot, okay, I will not because I have interest. And that is the best way to go. Otherwise, you sit on the panel, you can even do the best of judgment. But if later it comes up that you had a stake in the thing, then it rubbishes the whole thing. Okay. conflict of interest can easily become what a corruption situation. Okay, and so I will not belabor this point. If an official's actual performance, in fact, improperly affected by conflict of interest, they can breach the trust that the public has reposed in them, and then will use that public trust unfairly because they have a private interest in the issue at stake. They can see people breaching the law, but because they have a private interest, private relationship, private engagement, they have accepted gifts, they've accepted lands or mobile phones, Apple phones, and so then they breach the regulation and no sanctions. Okay, and so conflict of interest can easily make people corrupt, make people abuse their power, abuse their regulatory power. Okay, so I was watching this short video, and I think it's a Nigeria comedy, and the guy is like a visa officer. Okay, he works at the consulate, and so people come there for visas. So the lady came, and apparently, yeah, that is the guy's ex girlfriend, and so he just placed denied. He didn't go through the documents, denied. You see how the guy has abused his public office simply because of his kind of a private relationship or kind of past with a customer or a client. And the lady said she was going to Dubai, and the guy realized that, so you are going to Dubai with another man. So that very day, all the gentlemen who came to the embassy, everyone denied. That is how conflict of interest can make people abuse their power, which will easily lead to corruption, abuse of one's position. It will make people fail to perform their official duty adequately or correctly for reasons of personal advantage. Conflict of interest. There are three main forms, my dear friends. I think we will end with the three main forms. Okay. All right. The concept is applicable not only to situations where a conflict of interest actually exists. That's a direct one. This one, dear, straight, you are in it. There's a direct conflict of interest. But there are also situations where it appears to exist, or it is likely to exist. So this lady, the lady police officer, people were driving their DV car, and then they reached the police officer. This is Kumawood movie. Then the police officer asked the driver with the DV, where are you driving to? Okay, let's say they are in Accra. No, we are going to Kumasi, but it is 4 o'clock already. And that time, well, I learned the rule has changed. But that time, they said after 6 o'clock, you don't have to drive a DV car. Now, so you are aware. I learned now it has been relaxed or something.
Yes, Prof.
Very good. So once they disclosed to this Matilda, she was in short comedy, that they were going to Kumasi. She said, they have arrested you. What is our offense? In fact, it was Ojaba. I think Ojaba was the driver. They were doing Kumawood skits. He was the driver. And the police officer said, I've arrested you for future overspeeding. Because if you are going to Kumasi, you are already in Accra, and it is 4:30. By all means, you overspeed before you will reach Kumasi before 6. And if you don't overspeed, then it means you'll be using DV after 6. And if you will not be driving after 6, it means you'll be overspeeding before you get to Kumasi. So whichever way, I'm arresting you for future overspeeding. But we don't have any law like that. Right. Now, in conflict of interest, sometimes there's an appearance or the likelihood of it. That gives rise to three main forms of conflict of interest. So when you hear people say, discuss a conflict of interest situation and they want to rubbish, they want to say there is no conflict of interest because there is no direct, linkage. We need to make them aware that no, there are two other types. So once there's no direct, but let's look at the others. Is there an appearance or is there a potential that this gift you are receiving, it could potentially affect your dealing with the client? Maybe today their issue is not on your desk, but is it possible that their issue will come to your desk next week, next month, or next year, which will be a potential conflict of interest? So my dear friend, the three types we have got an actual conflict of interest, which involves a direct conflict between a public official's current duties and their responsibilities, as well as their existing private interests. So then there's a direct or private interest. Direct, you have direct, maybe even, let me say, financial interest in the company you are dealing with, but you are the procurement officer for the public office. And the company you are dealing with, you have a direct financial interest. This is a direct conflict of interest. Okay. Now with the direct or actual conflict of interest, it exists when the public official's current responsibility directly conflicts with an existing private. I've explained that already. For example, a regional fisheries director sits on the committee responsible for awarding license to commercial fishing companies, while secretly he owns shares in one of the applicants' companies. That is an actual conflict of interest. Direct. He has what? Share in the company. It is an ethical concern. The officer has direct financial interest in the decision and may favor the company for personal gain rather than public interest. What must he do then? He must declare the interest immediately and recuse himself from all discussions and decisions relating to the license. That is the best thing to do. So if it is on record that he disclosed and he recused himself, and then later, the company wins, of course, he can justify, he can sit on any TV, he can go through the TV test, okay? Well, he can will it that it becomes law. Okay, that is Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. That anybody faced with that situation, yeah, you must declare and recuse yourself. Another one is another scenario. A procurement officer responsible for purchasing fisheries, patrol boats, award contract to a company owned by his spouse. This is a direct conflict of interest. Actual. Public resources may not be used fairly, and the procurement process may lose its credibility. The best thing to do is to declare the relationship and withdraw from the procurement process, so that if in the end the spouse wins, well, no one can point or accusing finger. Even, well, sometimes people might do it underground. But, well, the optics can be good because you were not part. You declared and then you stayed off. But maybe, you talk to your friends behind the door, right? Nana, so they can do that. Posse,
Yes, Prof.
they can recuse themselves, but then,
Yes, Prof.
well, but at that point, you know that you've done the right thing. And, well, if your colleagues, they find merit in it, whichever way, but they might not give to your spouse. They might not give to him or her. That is actual conflict of interest. We also have a perceived or apparent conflict of interest. This one, it is not actual, but I mean, what would third parties think about it? What would the reasonable person on the street, as the lawyers will say, what would the ordinary person think about this situation? There is a perceived or an apparent conflict of interest, which can exist where it could be perceived or it appears that a public official's private interest could improperly influence the performance of their duties, whether or not this is the fact of the case. So with the perceived, you might not have any stake in the issue, but what would the people think about it? How would they perceive the situation? There is an appearance of it. Even though you don't have any private benefit or interest, but because of the kind of relations you have with the parties involved, what would the public think about it? What would be the public perception about it? Okay, this is a typical example here, a perceived conflict of interest. A fisheries inspector is assigned to inspect a fish processing company where his brother serves as operations manager. Although the inspector follows all procedures objectively, members of the public will question the fairness of the inspection. Yes, there's what a perceived conflict of interest, apparent. Even though he followed all procedures well, he has no what? He has no direct benefits because he is not a shareholder, but it is his brother. What will the public think? What will the people think about the issue? Public confidence is damaged because people may believe the inspector was biased, regardless of whether he acted professionally. This might require reassignment of the inspection to another officer, and he needs to disclose his relationship, and then maybe a different person should go and do it, and then you are fine, okay? Because the optics must be good. In all things that we do, justice must not just be done, but must be seen to be what? Manifestly what? Done. You cannot say I sat on the case involving my brother, but then, I followed the law. I followed all the procedures, required in making judgment. And so I am clean. No, there's a perceived conflict of interest, an apparent one. The confidence that the public will have may become more damaged. That is perceived conflict of interest. When a senior officer frequently accepts invitations from one fishing company to attend sponsored conferences and dinners, although no favors are exchanged, competing companies believe the officer receives preferential treatment. Okay, the appearance of bias can undermine trust in regulatory decisions and damage the credibility of the institution. Okay, so there are some gifts, unnecessary gifts and hospitality or gestures, which could be declined, or there should be some disclosure, okay, according to institutional policies, which will make the optics or look good. That is the perceived or apparent conflict of interest. What would the public think about this situation? What would third parties would think about it? Then we also have potential, we also have potential conflict of interest, where a conflict of interest may arise in the future due to personal interest conflicting with or influencing required. So this one, in the interim, we are not able to see any conflict of interest, but the kind of action or the gesture might lead to some future, in future might compromise the public officer's or position or action. Okay, so what you are doing, will it have any impact potentially tomorrow, next week, next month? Of course, today you accepted someone's, gesture, but would it have any potential impact on the tomorrow's or decision? That is a potential conflict of interest. A fisheries licensing officer plans to retire next year. Okay, you are the regulator. You are planning to retire next year. And because you are retiring next year, you have begun negotiating employment with a commercial fishing company. And that commercial fishing company, their license is currently under review, and you are part of those who are reviewing their license. Jesse, could there be any potential conflict of interest here?
Yes, it could.
The officer is clocking 60. The regulator is clocking 60. And next year, they might want to come and join your company because of their experience. But they have 1 year before they will leave. And so they still have access to public court power. And they are reviewing your contract or license. And because next year, their feet or one of their feet is on the premises of the company, they are likely to, to facilitate the licensing process and what. So that this is a typical potential conflict of interest. Future employment prospects may consciously or unconsciously influence current regulatory decisions. Okay, the best thing to do is to inform supervisors or avoid participating in decisions affecting. Well, that is the way to go. In certain countries like the US, they even put some clauses so that after serving the public, if you're a regulator and then you retire or you quit, they give you a certain number of years, okay? They bar you from even entering the private sector. Because then the argument is that if it is left to 3 years for me to retire, then I will secure some kind of engagement with some companies and I'll be giving them some insider information, some benefits, so that once I leave, I can easily go there and, And so they have some of these sort of mechanisms to ensure that public officers do not engage in potential conflict of interest of the sort. All right. So, my dear friends, these are the 3 forms of conflict of interest. I want you to go through this clip, and then we'll be wrapping up. I'll give you a task, okay, take-home assignment for you to go through.
Have you heard the following phrases? Actual conflict of interest, perceived conflict of interest, potential conflict of interest. What do they mean and how are they different? Well, in reality, there's not much difference at all. Each is grounded in the same principle we've already talked about, but they differ in terms of perspectives against which they are seen.
As its name suggests, actual conflicts of interest arise where there is a current and direct conflict between your personal interests and your official duties. It is an actual conflict of interest because the conflict has in fact materialised and is present. For example, as part of your professional duties, you are called upon to make a decision that could affect your personal financial interests, like awarding a contract to a company for which you hold shares.
A perceived conflict of interest is also sometimes referred to as an apparent conflict of interest. I will simply refer to it as a perceived conflict. Perceived conflicts are a little more complex to understand. A perceived conflict is considered from the point of view of a third person. Let's say, for example, that you work in a local council and you are responsible for asset maintenance. Your role is to ensure that contractors are regularly engaged to perform servicing of council equipment. There are a number of contractors you can choose from. One of the contractors is a person who you regard as a close friend. You're members of the same sporting club and you regularly go fishing together and drink together at the local hotel. As is natural, you want to look after your mates. Now imagine you're an observer of that situation. What would you think? Do you think the decision maker would bring a fair and unbiased mind to deciding who will get the contract? Or do you think that the person's personal interest, in this case his friendship with one of the contractors, might cloud their judgment? When we talk about perceived or apparent conflicts of interest, what we are talking about is how an outsider would perceive a given situation. In other words, would an outsider think that the decision maker could in some way be influenced by their personal interests in coming to a decision? Of course, that outsider has to be reasonable and fair-minded. They also need to know and understand the facts, the decision to be made, and the interests at play. Just because someone asserts that a perceived conflict of interest exists doesn't mean it exists. The perception has to be reasonably held.
A potential conflict of interest refers to some future circumstance where an actual conflict of interest could arise. Because the conflict of interest has not yet occurred, we don't often think about potential conflicts. But potential conflicts of interest are the reason that legislation and codes of conduct will sometimes require the advanced disclosure of personal interests, most commonly financial interests. For example, elected members of local government are required by legislation to provide an annual return setting out their interests, including shareholding, directorship, membership to political parties, and any other interests where a conflict of interest could arise. Codes of conduct are often require individuals to make a preemptive disclosure of specified personal interests. In that way, we are upfront about our personal interests and we are making them known. It is very important that we take the time to think about how our interests might conflict with our professional duties. By thinking about potential conflicts of interest, we are better placed to identify them when they do arise, and we can be ready to disclose and manage them appropriately.
All right, so that is the short video on conflict of interest and the three types. This is a typical one on perceived conflict of interest, the apparent one. What would third parties think about it? What would a reasonable person, someone who doesn't want to persecute you, I mean someone who is not your enemy, but a fair-minded person, the reasonable person, okay, what would they think about the situation? A disinterested person, what would they think about it?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's own guide to accountable government states, ministers of state, and parliamentary secretaries must avoid conflicts of interest in situations that have the potential to involve conflicts of interest. Aged spouses of cabinet ministers hold portfolios of publicly traded securities. This gives the appearance of a possible conflict of interest. So will the Conservative cabinet members do the right thing and disclose all family holdings?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Speaker, as I've already said in this place today, spouses disclose their holdings to the Ethics Commissioner in accordance with the rules and follow any instructions from the Ethics Commissioner on potential conflicts of interest.
All right. So, my dear friends, this is where we wrap up our work, but this will be your take-home assignment, my dear friends. I have this situation: allocation of fishing licenses. The Fisheries Commission establishes a committee to evaluate applications for new industrial fishing licenses. 3 committee members face different situations. These are conflict of interest situations. Member A owns 20% of one of the companies applying for a license. What kind of conflict of interest and why is it? Member B has a daughter employed by one of the applicant companies. She works in the company's HR department and has no involvement in the license application. What kind of conflict of interest? Member C has accepted an offer to become legal advisor to one of the companies after retiring in 6 months' time, but is still involved in reviewing the company's application. So, my dear friends, let's go and then try our hands on this and then provide reasons why we think maybe this one is this form of conflict of interest and the implication. Okay, any question, comments? Our task is to identify the types of conflict of interest in each situation. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, are you there?
Yes, Prof.
Okay.
Yes, Prof, we are here.
Okay. Jess, are you there? Okay. So you will try your hands on, and then next week we will meet and then we proceed. Okay. Any question, comment, my dear friends? For me? In the absence of any question, I will share the link to this recording to you, okay? Right.
All right.
Is it also nice that the public also learn about this? Or only 3 of us should learn it? Hmm?
It's right for the public to learn about
Yes.
it.
That is one thing, scholars usually do. We come and sit in our small corner and then we learn the thing. But then the public is denied access. So at the end of the day, when we are doing the right thing, they might not understand. And then they may sabotage. So I have come up with a policy that most of my sessions, once I'm done, I also, share it out there. And then I give the link to the students. Okay. I hope you are fine with that. Right?
Yes, Prof. Yes,
Very
Prof.
well.
Right.
Very well.
Yes,
So
sir.
I will share it, and then you can also be going through at all times, and then it will help you in your revision purposes and also for the purpose of educating the public or those who don't have the benefit of sitting in this class. Right. Thank you
Right.
very
Okay,
much,
sir.
and then enjoy
Thank you, sir.
your week. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, Prof.
Enjoy
Bye.
yours too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.